しもし、ママ、私、今日はもう帰らないから。どこに泊まるって言えるわけないじゃん。
Is that embarrassing, Blair? That ever happened to you? You're sitting there, you're watching an animated film, and you suddenly find yourself attracted to the animated figure. Isn't that terrible? Oh. I mean, you know, I'm relatively secure in my manhood, so I can say that. Oh. I mean, how embarrassing. How embarrassing to have a thing for an animated figure. If I were animated, by golly, I'd go to the beach more often.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Wish for Death Easel, an Easel where content creators such as myself wish they weren't reviewing the content they were, but are anyway because for some reason that can't really be explained, here I am, so why not? So if you're interested in the breakdown and analysis of all the messed up underground manga there is out there polluting the air, this is the video for you. Today we'll be talking about my misconduct. Now I know I haven't uploaded in 4 to 5 months, but that's okay, this video is here now. However, if you're new to content like this is like the 12th or the 15th video I've done about these ultra garbage book, a prime example being Parallel Paradise written by Okatoma Lin, aka the man who wrote Elfen Lied or Elfen Lied, which is somewhat good as a cult classic, but then you got books like this that are ultra misleading where there seems to be a substantial and legitimate story until the main heroine gets a Glock 19 shoved into her mouth, gets 4-letter R worded that rhymes with great by several unnamed individuals, only to discover the infamous girl tag at what seems to be the tail end of the story when the main villain finishes her off, not by blasting his cereal inside of her carton of milk, but by using his said prior Glock 19 to shatter her rib cage and leaving her to choke on her own blood, to have the book to pull a complete 180 and becomes a I spit on your grave type story, and the main heroine becomes my girl Jennifer Hills and takes it upon herself to finish the men a second time, but with the pointy side of an axe, meaning she kills them, but I'm trying to obfuscate what I'm saying because YouTube is being kind of dumb. So yes, this is Wish for Death Easel, where we hope that whoever draws this material doesn't decide to become a serial killer, and everyone prays for my peace of mind. Now ultimately, like the prior video, if my memory serves me correctly, what makes the EDP 445 and everyone else chatting up little kids for evil purposes bad is that these people don't feel any shame for what they do, and that's what makes what they do all the more evil, because when you stop feeling shame for the bad things you do and simply do it because you can, on that impulse, that's bad, especially if you're doing something bad. For them to continue to do shitty things, then go on a big soliloquy about how horrible they feel about it just to continue to do horrible and bad things, which makes you consider, why can't these people be happy? Are they fundamentally broken inside from their mental psyche to their souls? Or are they a black hole good people get sucked into and are deluded by who they idolize? It could even be that these people have massive lapses in judgment and get caught with their pants down, but it's hard to accept that argument when they've been caught in 4K for the 4th or 8th time with adolescence. So the question is, what makes pedophilia appealing and why the fuck do people ignore it in anime? And also, I think in the prior video I mentioned this story is similar to a storyline in Gossip Girls, the original, not the reboot, when that girl, Serena, tries to get her raviolis scrambled with a meat injection so it can start spewing out sauce because Ben, her teacher, is cute apparently. So yeah, that happened in the TV show. I was on the fence about it actually happening, but yeah, it did happen. Creepy! And despite my morbid curiosity, if you follow the prior videos I made on this series, or series of videos, and believe hentai and most doujinshi manga were devoid of content with any kind of meaning, you were proven wrong by this video or possibly the priors made. But it's always interesting to view how stories tell stories which elaborate on those stories to say something extra about them. For example, a writer doesn't have to explain a tsundere, yandere, or a hudere character archetype because they've been so ingrained within the anime and manga media, they are universally identifiable. Thus the author is able to say more by saying less. A perfect example of this would be Best Girls Shinjo Gohara Hitage from Monogatari. The Monogatari series of books books takes character archetypes and twists those archetypes and understanding of those kinds of characters into what it describes as transformative creative content, because the work of narrative archetypes and structures to the character similarities in the series featured throughout all of media are works not contained to themselves, but stockpiles of other people's ideas iterated on, creating a web of intertextuality between all authors and creators who were influenced by another person's work and or ideas, adding to them, or at the worst case, plagiarizing them. And in many cases, creativity and plagiarism are nearly indivisible, but the reason plagiarism happens is because it's done by people who dream themselves to be against what reality doles out, and plagiarism happens to save time, and it's really easy. For example, again, if you were to follow the prior video, if we were to assume Takeshi's R-Slut novel is based upon and a parody of ReZero, our understanding and interpretation of the story completely changes with the knowledge of the inspiring source material, and what is ultimately given birth to in the hands of another creator, and vice versa for understanding how R-Slut can distort our understanding of ReZero because the similarities to the narrative are on the story sleeve. So we can assume Saki 2.0 is Emilia and Subaru is Subaru from the R-Slut novel. It's the same how Astro Boy relates to Urasawa's Pluto novel, and how Gatchaman Krause relates to its source material Gatchaman, and how most famously how The Matrix is basically Ghost in the Shell fanfiction. But there's a difference between plagiarism and creative reconstruction, readily known as only a story you could make. Then there's stories like Time Paradox Ghostwriter revealing the fallacies of it and living with the mental turmoil it creates with a protagonist that is as free as he believes, with his creative freedom being as real as he believes it to be. In short, Time Paradox Ghostwriter is a manga that is infamous for its protagonist that plagiarizes a manga series in the future in the present day using time travel shenanigans very similar to Steins Gate, which people were up in arms about because the overarching story was about someone stealing someone else's creative work and making it their own and profiting from it. Whereas when anime like Kiss X Sis and Solitude We're Least Alone and Redo of a Healer drop, and we'll get bombarded by incest anime and XYZ degeneracy between student-teacher relationships and blah blah blah, and the most of the underground manga talked about here on this channel, nobody says anything. Then Time Paradox Ghostwriter comes out and everyone's up in arms about it and saying you can't publish that blah 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 blah. Even Killing the People Reincarnated into Another World Cheese Slayer was cancelled after one chapter for parodying the fact that isekai is just recycled media, with Kawata Humura's ultimately saying isekai blatantly references one another, which is honestly wholesome considering it happens all the time. So why are people upset at it? I don't know. Again, we have a smorgasbord of content that doesn't get called out for its bullshit, with people quick to defend their authors whose ability to write is sometimes non-existent, but because they slapped a long-ass paragraph as a title of their book, they get a pass. It's like the original Scary Movie series. There's a massive difference between being influenced by someone's work, that person or someone is willing to imitate it out of love and respect, and someone else regurgitating someone else's derivative content, passing it off as their own, and making money from it. Time Paradox Ghostwriter falls in the category of its protagonist copying another author's book and him calling it his book and his own idea, which is of course bad, but the overarching story critiques the literary genre, displaying how media created without a soul generates an endless source of lackluster entertainment for the intention of making money from said media because it's an easy cash grab with an unending conveyor belt of toys, trinkets, and anime series and TV spin-offs, with an added movie here and there to appease your corporate overlords' possibly evil machinations. For example, when Naruto ended, we got Boruto because
here's the last season of my show, sir.
The last season? That is crazy. You know your show's number one in the world, right?
Number one in the world.
I'm talking about it made millions for our studios. Millions. Like One Piece, Naruto. Mm-hmm. That's why we were thinking, maybe you should just try and give it another season.
I don't think I can do that, sir. The show's already perfectly wrapped up. All the questions have been answered, and I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been perfectly wrapped up, but just give the main character a kid. So,
but who'd the kid fight? The main villain's already been beat. I can't do that either, sir.
Well, then give the main villain a kid too. Problem solved.
That doesn't make any sense.
That does make sense. That's why I'm telling you to do it.
That's forced. I'm not putting that in my show.
It won't be forced if you just write it better.
I'm not writing that.
Somebody's writing it.
Well, it's not gonna be me.
It's not gonna be me either.
Well, who is it?
If you don't write it, I'm gonna give you a trash spinoff.
Well, I'm not writing it.
Get it.
What are you?
Nah.
Bring the car. What is it? What is it?
Hey, get started on the spinoff.
No! Don't take my show! Don't take my show! Ah!
hand right here. Boy, you done played too much.
And that's what's great about art and makes it beautiful. Instead of writers creating books to appease fans and audiences, art is best when authors write for themselves to learn more around the world around them or to explore. You'd often hear me jest and joke around how authors sometimes use their books to vicariously live through their stories and characters to escape from reality to, to access a level of freedom not found in reality and explore an endless pool of imagination and creativity to obfuscate the bygone reality of mediocrity and normalcy the world has become now that everything unknown has become a known in our world. Whereas in fiction, words have the power to transform lies, shape ideologies, and transform thoughts into actions, potentially adding new layers of meaning to other people's lives and experience emotion never thought of or dreamed through empathy and connection to those ideas that can shape hearts if those said ideas are executed properly. A prime example of a show that doesn't do this and is written by one of those AIs that assemble and read thousands of books is Jobless Reincarnation, which is a book about a 30-something-year-old man seducing a 12-year-old girl through a 10-year-old's body because he was isekai'd into a 10-year-old's body after being reincarnated in it. That, of course, thinks with the tip of his dick and constantly has his brain in his pants. And despite what many people say about blah 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 character development, blah 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 European medieval fantasies to objectify women and pass them around in a bonfire-like environment like a commodity to be bought and sold, blah blah blah. Overall, the story's foundation is built on the premise of bad character traits and a child molester main character dressed up in a cliche isekai elements, with the main character getting everything he wants in life from everything he didn't have in his previous life because of course he does, and the narrative wouldn't make sense any other way if the author couldn't vicariously live through the degenerate protagonist he's created and like Rito the Healer live out his depraved sex fantasies through his writings like he's Casanova, with characters laughing their morals away as they get away with things they most likely would never get away with in this century, ranging from sexual harassment to rape, and of course pedophilia happens to be a fucking character trait for some reason, which means by simply existing, characters do things nobody has to see and do nothing people should never be asked to do. And by the time the book asks a character to display some level of humanity, of course the villains are and will be more despicable and vile than the supporting and main character have been, and play every bad thing the protagonist does with his merry band of ashholeish characters gets played off as a complete joke, meaning, hey, the main character's a trash bag, but look, we got this bigger trash bag over here next to a dumpster. Isn't that more trash than the trash that you're looking at right now? And for people that believe anime that showcase pedophilia, rape, and random acts of violence for funsies, shits, and giggles without trying to tell some kind of story, try to have some kind of standards and not call everyone a pansy-wansy because they don't like the same tastes as you. I mean, if you like watching a main character's illusion of grandeur for power and control, fantasizing about grooming a girl into his ideal partner, or something crazy like that, good for you. I mean, I like to love Rue, an anime that features a protagonist that's in sexually gratifying situations with its arc bending towards male fantasy and the male demographic. However, though this may be the case, at least the women surrounding the main character like him and actively want to bone him, meaning at least it's kinda consensual in a way, wholesome and playful in a way. The point is, to love Rue, the women aren't hostile or have any ulterior motives or subjecting the main character to some kind of ill will or ill-begotten fate. They're doing it because they're just playing around with him, and the main character understands that. Whereas the main character of Jobless Reincarnation is corrupt in mind, body, and soul. And when people say it's a redemption story, the question becomes, if you believe this anime is a portrayal of our contemporary world, would you forgive a pedophile who busts their honey nut Cheerios to children with terabytes of no-no pictures instead of going to his family's funeral, who died and actively continues to be a scumbag loser piece of shit, which the title has no relationship to the manga, and yes, there is a disturbing manga called Scumbag Loser Piece of Shit, but continuing from what I was saying, the main character is a scumbag loser piece of shit in their first life and tries not to be one in his next life, only to discover he's still a scumbag loser piece of shit that got a do-over because reasons that apparently pay off way later in the story that I'm not watching or reading. Maybe his family died and went to heaven, and they're like, man, I feel bad for whatever his name is, let me help him out, hit him with a truck and let him start over. The point is, is, Jobless Reincarnation is about a 30-something-year-old in a kid's body boasted by an undisturbing and top-notch animation team, which could have been utilized elsewhere, like, I don't know, No Game No Life 2, and even when the narrative doesn't pretend like it's another cliche wish fulfillment themed harem show with a stupidly overpowered protagonist with an absent budget, Jobless Reincarnation is an anime with a significant budget, with a stupidly overpowered main protagonist, and the supporting characters are his harem of women, leading the charge into another generic isekai fantasy story. Now, I don't know the reason, but there was real money put in this show, and its popularity does nothing but make anime fans look bad for putting a show with such a morally bankrupt and perspective-based story with a stupidly high level of degeneracy on a pedestal without anyone calling out its flaws and saying it's awesome anyway. Despite being a generic run-of-the-mill isekai story drowned in isekai cliches because the show isn't the good season of Game of Thrones or Vikings, it belongs in a septic tank with any other self-insert protagonist within the isekai genre that happens to be a fucking pedophile. Meaning, for me personally, this is a book with a lead character that deserves no sympathy, even when reaching my bottom line of being a decent person. Now again, I don't care how the story unfolds or how things shake out, bada bing, bada boom could happen, and a time traveler does some time travel shenanigans, and it is revealed to be the cause of the main character being isekai'd, which is the ending of literally another isekai novel that I read, but unfortunately, I remember, so I do not forgive Rudius, and Rudius is a villain from my eyes. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up Jobless Reincarnation, and not talking about killing ex-stalking's deluded fanbase that believes psychological torture and mental turmoil equal romance, I'd say again, abuse does not equate to love, no matter the context, but that's an entirely different video that I'll make eventually, featuring killing stalking in another manga called The Girl Downstairs, which is written by single men who also wrote Nanolist, also one of my favorite books, alongside Killing Stalking as a psychological thriller. But Jobless Reincarnation and this H-type book / doujinshi share similarities. Both protagonists are sick people that have imprinted their delusions into reality because reality wasn't enough for them, so it makes perfect sense for them to groom an adolescent character into their ideal partner. That's literally what this book is about. From page 1 all the way to its ending, it's about a woman grooming a little boy to be the ideal man that she wants. The context of the book between the beginning and the ending is pretty much explaining her psychological profile and how ultimately she got to this point into her life where she's doing this. Now, in the prior video, I believe I spoiled the ending for this book. As it turns out, that is not the ending. It's something I made up in my mind because I wanted a happy ending, I suppose. But no, it's a bad ending. Now, there's a manga / anime that exists called A Happy Sugar Life, and a lot of what that story features is what this story features. Psychotic people doing psychotic things. The overarching story of A Happy Sugar Life is about a teenage girl named Sato, a beautiful high schooler who has a reputation of being a promiscuous woman with men. However, after a chance encounter with a young girl about 8 years old named Shio, Sato realizes she's in love with an 8-year-old girl, which of course causes her to kidnap the 8-year-old girl and hold her hostage in her apartment, and tells others that she's living with her aunt while she secretly shares an apartment with a little girl that's 8 years old named Shio that she abducted. So yeah, she does what most psychotic people would do, with the goal of maintaining something she refers to as her, quote, happy sugar life, end quote, going up against other pedophiles located around her zip code in a battle royale for the love and affection of an 8-year-old girl. Madness. To give you a little idea about what's in this book / anime, the manager of the local restaurant in the little community she lives in, she's a pedophile. The victim of the manager who gets raped and stashed away in a closet like leftover food from a dinner party and eaten when ready, he becomes a pedophile because he was raped. The teacher, he's literally fucking with his students and is risking it all with his family on the line, using them as collateral. He's a pedophile too. There are no good people in the show besides Shio's homeless brother, who is homeless and has the goal of giving his sister a decent life. And the best part of it all, he's not a degenerate. And that's the only thing this show has going for it. This show isn't only bad, it's hysterical, but simultaneously interesting because it explores what happens when your wildest dreams and the highest heights are reached and what's found beyond those horizons. And the answer is It's nothing. And that's what makes these stories so awesome and intriguing, is that they tell stories of characters coping with their happy ending by showing what comes after the day of their happy ending. Take Netflix's You series, for example, which is based off the books. The story of Joe, a psychopath searching for happiness that just so happens to stalk, murder, and blackmail his way into a woman's life to live out his perfect fantasy of what a woman should be, enthralled in the pursuit of having an unattainable woman than actually having her emotionally and physically. So much so, by the time he has quite literally everything he could ever have wanted from a woman, who knows everything about him, including the deaths he's caused and the misery he's inflicted onto more people than she can count on her fingers, and she still wants to be with him, carrying his child with a piggy bank in the 6 figures tax bracket. The man risks it all to set up season 3, lusting after the affection of his next door neighbor, which definitively proves these characters care more about chasing their degenerate fantasies than actually pursuing something as genuine as love. In other words, the fate of every character within every book I've discussed priorly in this video all have empty ambitions with no ending in sight, because that's what these characters are. They're motivated by their perversions that are realistically unrealistic, thereby being unobtainable. But why do it, you might ask? Why do people masturbate? Because it feels good. And though these characters are slipping and sliding all over the floor further than a penguin slides on its tummy on ice, it's those very deplorable actions these characters partake in while wearing their rose-tinted glasses, seeing all the red flags around them as red flags, allowing these characters to experience the vibrancy of a world full of sparkles, cupcakes, and rainbows from their deluded vision, which adds to the utmost supernatural illusion and breakaway from reality, from the perceived reality of other people believing their delusions are somehow more special and important than anyone else's goals and ambitions, no matter how innocent they are. Not only does this enable the characters to do what they do, whereas the people the psychopaths build up in their minds to be godlike figures who could take a shit on you in your mom's fine china and still sing praises about them from the moon and back to earth, don't even appear to be real people. The people are characterized as a normal everyday Joe or Sally, struggling to not run their lives into the ground with a less than genius personality. From Yuki's loser personality in Future Diary, to Shio from Happy Sugar Life, to whatever the hell those characters' names were in Jobless Reincarnation, Bum from Killing and Stalking, and Haru's bright and cheerful personality that shows kindness to everyone without a flutter, that's blindly optimistic and never-endingly happy within Akuma no Riddle, to the countless support characters within these Yandere-themed Predator stories. It's all the same. These stories are stupid yet entertaining books about dumb, over-the-top violence, and I'm perfectly fine with that, as long as the main character, or whoever it is, gets to comeuppance at the end. Actually, honestly, for me, it kind of depends on the genre. I like Future Diary's ending, but as long as the narrative is concentrated, I should be fine, even if, like, there's an elephant spewing out a rainbow and Skittles are coming out of his trunks. Anyway, cue the Michael Jordan.
Stop it. Get some help.
Hold up, I forgot. Don't do drugs, drink in moderation, stay safe, and if you think about doing anything in this video and imitating it in reality, remember...
Stop it. Get some help.
The start of My Misconduct uses a drug addiction allegory in an attempt to explain the character's obsession with the teenage boy she's in love with, that just so happens to look like a kid sometimes from her perspective, which is of course absolutely disgusting. Now, naturally, like in my prior video, if you're wondering what's worse, this book or School Days, I'll let you refer to the Trash Compactor family tree, which School Days is based upon, revolves around, and again, I'm not sure how this anime got multiple hentais, OVAs, and mangas, but somehow it did, and people actually read it, and I'll admit, I'm one of those people. Hell, I read this book. But anyway, unlike the first book, this book opens up to a monologue about obsession and passion, but the bottom line of what's being said rounding up to the fact you don't need to obsessively cling tightly to something to love it, and even letting it go can be an expression of love, which the main character obviously ignores, saying that the enthusiasm for the most simplest of things that doesn't require much skill can be meaningful as long as the original intent, let's say having fun, is present, is communicated to others, with people sharing the same joy and creativity from its highest of highs to its lowest of lows. But at its worst, sometimes passions are unobtainable ideals that are ideals because they are statistically uncertain to strive for, with some people who simply can't, whereas some are are naive to say, of course you can. And given enough time, your longing for peace, tranquility, and meaning within the world will come forth, ending not only your depression, but your apathy and low self-esteem, believing all your life you sleptwalk through life. But of course, sometimes that doesn't happen, and that doesn't always work, especially when you're attracted to kids and grooming them into being the person you want them to be because you're delusional. But if you've seen the prior video, you can imagine what happens next. The bad lady plays with her kitty box to a picture of a teenage boy who's lacking in personality besides the fact that he happens to like the same book as she does. The devil shows up, and like a junkie, the main character says, the only thing pushing me forward in life is this teenage boy, and I'm not a better person than this. So she promises to God she'll ruin whatever gets in her way of her perversions and degeneracy, then transforms into a high school girl to carry out all her wickedness and unethical deeds because fuck it. Also, she learns what happened in the prior book and says she won't make the same mistakes as Saki 2.0, but that's a bold-faced lie. Chapter 2. I haven't yet given the villain of the story a name, and after sleeping on it, I've landed on Sayu. Thus, and henceforth, even if you've seen whatever her name is, it's now Sayu, because I say it is, and I'm not good at names. Whereas the boy will be named Izanagi. Yes, I named this character after a pigeon. But the duration of this chapter includes nothing much more than a narrative panhandling that was discussed in the prior video, but I'll fly through it now for the sake of the people who may have not seen it or flat out forgotten. Long story short, Lucifer is the devil, and the only viable way for him to remain in the human world is to sucker some degenerate loser who's just desperate enough to say yes to doing anything and accepting one of his contracts to accept the reality-bending powers he peddles in exchange for condemning your soul to hell. Sure, you get superpowers fueled by your libido and get superpowers, but it's obviously something you shouldn't be doing because if devil exists, God ain't too far away, and you've just thrown away your express ticket to heaven. Anyways, Sayu gets the ability to transform into a teenager, but to maintain her form, she has to constantly masturbate or have sex to keep her power gauge in check to be a teenager because plot reasons. Now, not to meander in Arkham's razoring to the point, after being a teenage girl again and wooing Izanagi using insider knowledge about the boy from being his teacher, she comes to the conclusion that she likes teenage boys as much as she likes to masturbate, which from her perspective means she's in love, apparently. And she goes on a big humbug about how she wished she'd done X, Y, and Z during high school, whereas when everyone else that went to high school around my time wished they didn't remember high school at all. But entering the tail end of the chapter, the author pulls the rug underneath the reader, and the plot twist is, this isn't only a book about an insane Yandere woman, it's a NTR book about how a Yandere screws over her fiance and risks it all to date and groom a teenage boy like something out of the OG Gossip Girls, with her set to get married. Chapters 3 to Chapter 5. The character constantly goes on a blah 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 monologue about how she doesn't intend to fall in love with Izanagi, but just look at the level of delusion on screen. She's gone mad, and she's in love. But the remaining context in these two chapters is, Sayu constantly bitches and moans about her fiance's mother, and how she's a babbling idiot and doesn't shut up, whereas the father is drunk all the time compared to the boorish detached man she's supposed to marry because he's not a teenage boy. Which translates into, she cares more for Izanagi than the handout she has on her lap with an introverted man that loves her and has a supporting family to pump them both up. Well, in the span of 16 hours, Sayu's raviolis are gushing like a waterfall, and she's head over heels in love with the boy, assigning mundane activities like playing Scrabble to mind-blowing, orgasmic experience you'd only experience while doing the devil's tango, and other things that would occur once in a lifetime, like learning to ride a bike, or eating a tasty cake for the first time, until she realizes she can't be an adult and be in love with a teenager, and pulls a jobless reincarnation and decides to be a full-fledged high schooler to live out her fantasy. Meaning, we have a mind of a 28-year-old woman trying to seduce a 14-year-old boy, succumbing to her vices instead of, I don't know, seeing a psychiatrist and listening to Michael Jordan.
Stop it. Get some help.
Better yet, just go to the police right now. Tear yourself in. Save everyone the trouble. But instead of doing that, she finds the will to break up with Izanagi, which is a good start, but kisses him before they separate, which causes a whole new set of problems because Izanagi's hormones aren't right now. Remember that analogy I made regarding drugs and junkies pushing pills and making up bullshit to enable their addiction for the sake of themselves at the expense of others? Sayu is a junkie. However, Izanagi is a drug, and though I'm not a medical professional, I'll take a gander and say the reason why drug addicts don't stop being drug addicts and stop cold turkey is not just because of the withdrawal problems, but because the ingrained memory of pleasure and ecstasy drugs made them feel, and the desire to feel that again is forever in that person's memory, edging them to do it again because people are dominated by their vices, especially in today's society where those said vices are easily accessible. It's not a lack of willpower per se that enables junkies, crackheads, and junkies to be those kinds of people. It's more so drugs are the voices these people hear when they need to protect themselves when the world or people around them refuse to do so, and it makes them happy when the world makes them feel like shit all the time, delivering something akin to true happiness in mind, soul, body, and spirit. Thus, learning to cope with not feeling this feeling in life is just as important as not learning to accept it when things are bad, or doing something because you can, or doing something for someone else, which happens to coincide with the plot with Lucifer getting more in return off his investment into Sayu than she stands to gain. So naturally, instead of getting the hell out of Dodge and checking into a mental asylum, she makes a deal with the devil and decides to groom the boy because she wants him to make her the perfect drug, with him as the drug and her using him as a drug, which is honestly insidious. Chapter 6 to Chapter 12. In short, it's all downhill from here, showcasing the ultimate problem with pedophilia, not only from an ethical perspective, but from an emotional and psychological one too, that circles back to what most likely would have occurred in Roman and Greek society. Super denial, that amounts to internal character logic that has the character hitting a new low bar supported by delusions of grandeur, not understanding the limitations of the potential of human beings with no self-control over her own actions. To further elaborate what I'm saying here, Sayu's delusions and her attraction to Izanagi stem from her trying to avoid how unpleasant being an adult can be, using him as an excuse to avoid everything she doesn't like about the world, or creating a little bubble she can live in and break away from reality in, and become dependent on an illusion to push herself forward. But what could she be avoiding, you might ask? Well, a lot. There's her loveless relationship with her fiance, her degrading job where her students demean and ignore her insecurities, her debts, the normal laundry list of problems people incur when becoming an adult, the gas bill, the electric bill, got your student loans. The struggle is real. But returning to the topic of Sayu's marriage, it was a loveless endeavor built on the idea that whatever the man's name was tolerable, and out of fear of being alone in life, she figured she might as well marry the beta man and settle because life couldn't get any better than this. And if it's not this, there's no lonelier feeling to have when you're old and bitter and hiring prostitutes to have meaningless sex with. But it's around this time Sayu's true intentions are revealed, and her motivation is locked in tighter than a plug jammed into a switch, with her endgame being marrying Izanagi and having his babies. But until that's legally possible and they become of age, because you know, Sayu is an adult, but she ages backwards to transform into a teenage girl. But you already know the idea how it works. I don't know why I'm trying to explain this, but yada yada yada, she settles with raping him every day so she can, you know, ultimately transform into a teenage girl and maintain that form for a very long time. So to solidify her insane plan, she had sex with her fiance for the last time, and this is the wildest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it. So while Sayu and the fiance, the beta man, are having sexual intercourse, the beta man is finally about to add some milk to his Honey Nut Cheerios. Sayu shuts the whole thing down while she's still inside of him. She calls everything up. The wedding, the marriage, seeing him, texts, phone calls, don't want to see the family, the whole 9 yards. She just shuts it all down right then and there. And afterwards, she asks for the milk. Then she has this massive orgasm. They don't even do the pillow talking thing, and she just bails, putting her insane plan into action. So some events happen in between here and there, but we can graze over it. None of it's really exciting or significant to the plot. So Sayu literally moves into Izanagi's house as a teenage girl, which conveniently aligns up with her plans because his mother is supposedly dead and the father is away on business trips all the time, so they are free to live their happy sugar life, which includes sex once a day at minimum and a suffocating relationship controlled by a self-loathing 20-something-year-old woman in the body of a teenager, which at first seems normal, of course, until it isn't. And when I said it was a suffocating relationship, I meant that quite literally, and she's choking the absolute hell out of him. It's not even a fetish sex related thing. She's literally draining away his life force and he's grasping for air because she caught him slipping, playing with his hormones by himself for that one-on-one attention instead of doing the devil's tango. It's at this point it's revealed that Sayu has been having an emotionally manipulative relationship with Izanagi, trying to set him up with a Life for Dummies subscription because she lived a crappy life and now knows all the correct chess moves to make to win at life, which naturally leads to him calling his father, which is something that normally doesn't happen in these kinds of stories, and they change the locks on the door of the house and they kick her ass to the curb to fend for herself, which leads to the end game of the story, featuring Sayu trying to have desperation sex like a dollar whore in the corner, only to get rejected by the only man who attempted to understand her beta man fiance. So in retaliation, she goes on a serial killer murder spree, killing Izanagi's housemaid and father just for kicks, and I'm pretty sure she kills some other people too, but I forgot. Then finds Izanagi at school where she reveals the truth, which blends her delusion with reality. And Sayu confesses her truth to Izanagi, revealing the truth and all the candles on the cake, saying she's really his missing teacher because remember, she abandoned her previous identity to be the teenage girl full time, so naturally the teacher was assumed missing and police reports were filed and etc. Only for Izanagi to reveal that he is in love with her and understands her maddening behavior, keeping all these secrets held in, and they go steady because they're in love. Even though this is beyond out of character and logic be damned, they get married and have a big Evangelion style congratulation sequence and everyone's clapping and they're happy, and unlike Shinji, they live happily ever after. The end. Psych! Of course, Izanagi is utterly disgusted and looks at Sayu like she's hot garbage, and most likely gets a lifetime subscription to any therapist of his choosing for as long as he lives. But this is also a portion of the story where things happen without much explanation, and even though she got caught slipping, and a lot of people saw her transform into a high schooler back into adult and vice versa, somehow she still got access to Izanagi despite the fact that somebody should have called the police, which they did. But unfortunately, because the police in Japan are also incompetent in this book, so in the final pages, Sayu gets away and she takes Izanagi and she rapes and ravages Izanagi's raviolis until the end of days, which I mean quite literally. And the most disturbing illustration I've seen in a little bit, the final sequence of the book features Sayu raping Izanagi and Sayu accepting she will eventually get caught by the police and resolves to have as much fun as she possibly can with the boy, Izanagi, and kill him and herself when the fun finally ends. This is by far the scariest part of the book, as the author is tasked with illustrating Izanagi's increasing level of fear, sadness, and desperation as he's being raped and pleading for his life. As the book reaches its conclusion, the police finally arrive, but once they arrive to the scene and enter the room, the page goes black and the series ends. The end. So I was under the interpretation that Izanagi survived and Sayu went to jail, which wasn't the case, but I'll pretend she went to jail anyway because I like to play make-believe sometimes too and have a happy ending. So yes, Sayu went to jail, Izanagi got away, happy ending. But given my final thoughts on the book, if we were to take everything given to us, the reader, at a face value, pedophilia, according to this author at least, it seems to stem from not only a sexual attraction to people who are adolescent, but people who are unsatisfied with their lives and want to rebuild the image of who they are from the perception of someone who isn't sullied by the horrific weight of reality and a genuine longing to be loved, because it's all about their image and persona to them. Throughout this series, Sayu was a very introverted character with not a lot of friends or people that she interacted with, but with the interactions we did see other than with the fiance's family, a lot of people didn't like her or seemed to wanted to avoid her, so she wanted to change her perception and be liked by her students. She didn't even get that either, so it makes sense throughout the story she was trying to entice Izanagi into liking her, because remember, this entire book happened because Izanagi showed interest in the teacher, showing that they liked the same literary author. But in addition to that, there was a laundry list checkbox of things that they just had in common. But to elaborate on this further, Izanagi is a character that can be subtly manipulated and was naive and gullible enough to actually want to be around Sayu. And remember, the reason why Sayu was marrying her fiance was because she didn't want to be alone throughout life and she was scared and all these compounding and social pressures and etc, etc, etc. The reason why she wanted to be with Izanagi is because it was easy, and unlike her fiance, they shared commonalities that she couldn't find in anyone else. But again, Sayu's character is lazy, so she really didn't have to be with Izanagi. She was just patient enough. Eventually someone would roll around, but that's not her character. Another reason for Sayu's breakaway from reality reality, though it's not explicitly stated in the book, is childhood trauma and unrealistic ideations about life and people is another contributing factor that made Sayu Sayu. But all in all, she's still an egregious character and an evil, evil woman.